You're listening to Making a Living Show. I'm Roby Levy.
Hi, I'm Samuel Engelking, and I make photos for a living.
Samuel Engelking is an editorial, commercial, and portrait photographer based in Toronto. He's that rare breed of shooter whose love of light, lenses, and learning everything he can about photography has taken him all over North America, shooting celebrities and notable personalities as the staff photographer at Canada's premier alternative weekly, Now Magazine. Here's my chat with Samuel Engelking. Who are you and what do you make for a living?
All right. Well, my name is Samuel Engelking. I'm a photographer in Toronto, Ontario. I focus on portrait, editorial, and commercial work.
How did you get into photography?
So I got into photography in my last year of high school. That's basically when I discovered the medium as an interesting art form and as a science. So somehow I just started flipping through pages of like Time magazine. I was seeing photojournalistic images capturing like historical events in such interesting and artful ways that it just really attracted me, and I decided that this is something I wanted to do. So I started reading about photography. I had discovered this like encyclopedia set of photography in my high school library, and this thing was like ancient. There were like 5 books. It was a whole series, and they just like reeked of like that old book smell. It had dusty pages. I would flip through these things, and I was reading it, and it just captivated me. I felt like I was reading about alchemy or magic. It was just absolutely fascinating. I became obsessed, and I started like skipping classes to go to the library and read these books. And for about 6 months or so, half a year, I was just reading these books every day, just taking it all in. And at the same time, I started saving up for a camera. So by the time I finally got my hands on a camera, this was the film days too, mind you. Yeah, I started taking some shots, and the results were great because I already had this wonderful foundation of like the principles and the technical aspects of photography, and I was able to apply that to the pictures I was taking right away. So I was like ecstatic at the results, and that just furthered my interests in photography. So at that point, I decided to go to school. So I went to school for photojournalism.
Where'd you go?
I went to Loyalist College in Belleville, Ontario. So there's only 2 schools in Canada that offer a program in photojournalism. It was either move to Belleville or move to BC.
Do you feel like you made the right decision?
Actually, in retrospect, I probably should have.
Scenic Belleville?
Yeah, exactly. But it was close to home. So yeah, so I got the advantage of home meals, home cooked meals, and visits back to Toronto.
So you read all these books, then you got a camera, however many months later, then you were able to apply stuff. But you said it was the last year of high school. So when did you actually go and enroll in school? Did you take a couple of years off and shoot a bunch of stuff, or did you just know at that point?
No, I knew at that point.
Yeah,
I knew it at that point. There was nothing else I wanted to do. So yeah, I pursued it right after high school, went right into it, and it was fantastic. It was like for the first time, I started really enjoying school. I was never a good student, never found a topic that I was interested in. But once I discovered things I was interested in, I became a really good student.
So what led you to pull those books off the shelf? Like, what was it that piqued your interest?
I think about this sometimes, and I'm not really sure. It's interesting how, yeah, sometimes things happen in your life and you're just drawn to something. You can't explain why, but it just happened. It wasn't like this lead up to it. It happened so quickly.
That's great. That's very fortunate reading. Good use of the Dewey Decimal System.
It almost feels like destiny.
So you got to school, and this is for photojournalism then. But what's photojournalism? What kind of photography is that?
Right. So photojournalism is basically newspaper photography / like documentary photography. It's the act of recording events, but it goes beyond that. A photojournalist might have to do a food assignment or a portrait of a person on location, or might be a studio shot, or it could be a hard news event. It could be something that just happened, and you got to get down there and capture it. Or it could be a press conference. Like it literally could be anything. So a photojournalist is basically a jack of all trades in terms of photography.
In terms of the skill of photography, but you're chasing a story, right? Like there's always a target, moving or otherwise, that you're going out to grab.
Yep.
Is it safe to say that, like documentary, though, I know doc in film tends to push the limits at times, but Is there a purity to it? In other words, do you mess with it? Do you get involved in the scene that's happening, or are you just an observer, anthropologically speaking?
Right.
You're supposed to be recording an event, or can you be a part of it, or is there some play there?
That's a great question, actually. Typically, at least what we learned in school is that it should be more should take a fly on the wall approach. So it's very much like an anthropological study in the sense that you are just there documenting the story and not so much getting involved.
If you go on Netflix and you hit the documentary, genre, a lot of those things are not documentary in its truest form.
Yes.
It's flirting with reality TV. It's playing with dictating the story. Is that what photojournalism does that have that kind of play as well?
Yeah, no, yeah. So in photojournalism, there isn't a lot of play. You're really not supposed to mess with the reality of the situation. In fact, it's a really serious thing. Like it could get you blacklisted with newspapers. That there have been occurrences of photojournalists like losing titles and prizes and awards because afterwards it had come to light that a photo had been manipulated in some way. So yeah, really like photo manipulation has to be non-existent. You might just do a few adjustments in terms of like, increasing the brightness of an image a bit or back in the day, you were allowed to get rid of dust specks that were on the film, stuff like that. But really you're not supposed to alter the image. I think things may be loosening up a little bit, just given the whole nature of where the medium is at and such. But for the most part, yeah, it's pretty strict.
You're saying in today's day and age, there's a little bit extra that may be asked of the photojournalist because you said you are going to go out, you're going to do journalism, but you may also be asked to do a portrait as part of this assignment.
Yeah, exactly. So in that sense, that's a portrait. That's more of a creative endeavor. Whereas if you're capturing an event, right, you wouldn't want to alter that event because then it's not truthful and objective. But if you're doing a portrait, then there's obviously you're not playing so much with reality. You're telling the story. So the portrait that you're taking would be in the context of an editorial story, and your job would be to somehow try and convey some piece of that in your photo.
So that's effectively asking the photojournalist to be two types of photographer.
Yes, interpret.
And probably above and beyond, I think you said as well, like sometimes you're sent out to do, let's say, a piece on food. Well, all of a sudden now you've got to have some food stylist,
Yeah.
an eye for it at least.
Right. Right.
Is this something that you knew was going to become the evolution of your photojournalism? Did you know you were going to have to add these extra skills, these different
No, I did not know. I knew very little about what a photojournalist actually did when I went to school for it.
You just
Very
knew
little.
snapshot looks good, get it
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
get it in
yeah,
the
yeah.
magazine.
Right. I had no idea that you'd be such a generalist, which is partly due to I like halfway through school I realized like that photojournalism wasn't really the right avenue for me. It didn't change the fact that I want to be a photographer, but I realized at that point that I wanted more creativity. I wanted more control over what I shot and how I shot it. So I didn't end up pursuing that route, and yeah, I became more of a portrait photographer, editorial photographer, and yeah, and I also dabble in some commercial work as well.
What drew you to portraits?
Faces. I love faces. People are the most interesting subjects on the planet, in my opinion. And I love the ability to connect with someone and create beautiful images and craft and shape light. And it's always different. And yeah, there's just infinite possibilities where you can take that image, right? Whereas with photojournalism, if I'm shooting an event, I'm very much restricted by what's right in front of me, and I literally have no control. And for me, like the pleasure in photography is the creative process and the act of crafting something.
So when you're going to sit down and do a portrait with somebody, take me through a little bit about what the creative process is. Because for a lot of people, it's sit on this stool.
Yeah,
I'm gonna, point the flash up
right.
in the air, and I'm gonna snap it. Like, why does it take time to get a good portrait?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that go into it, and obviously, it's different for everyone, and it depends on what the portrait is for. Honestly, like the most satisfying work is the personal work that I do because that's when I get to be as creative as I possibly can be. But yeah, I mean, everything. there are many factors at play here. So it go from wardrobe choice to lighting to background. What does the person look like? How can we play up certain features or play down certain features? Are we really trying to create a mood, or are we just trying to create a nice professional personal image for their business, or are we are we just going to go out creative? Like for example, um, I had shot a couple of images for a film poster, and it's a series of images for a film, and they're inspired by Carbiat. Sorry, I'm trying to get this name right. Caravaggio? Yeah, Caravaggio. So it's really dark, low key lighting, very painterly. And that was just an absolute blast. So for that, we had to get the right wardrobe that reflected that time period. We had to get props. Things had to be lit very specifically. We had to use the right light modifiers to get the same quality of light that Caravaggio would have imitated. Um, there were so many factors at play, but in the very end, like we got images that came very close to the painterly style that he's very known for.
You keep using we. Who's we?
Yes. So again, like portraiture, specifically, and many other many other genres in photography, are a collaborative process, right? So I worked with my subjects. I worked with a prop stylist, my assistant, and together we had a vision that we were trying to achieve, and it was a collaborative process. Everybody had a part to play, and we wouldn't have been able to achieve the end results without that process. So we all have to be on the same page, and we're all working together towards a singular vision.
When you're out doing journalism, you're shooting what's out there, what's available to you, including light, including the subject, including even your perspective is sometimes not up to you. You could be shoved over into the press, pool and just have to hold a camera up in the air and hope you're shooting something in focus.
Exactly.
When you're doing a portrait, you're generally in a controlled environment, like a studio or perhaps somebody's place of work or some sort of environment where you have free reign to bring these people and these props and these sets together.
Correct. Correct. And even if I was like outside, I'd still have the potential to take control of my environment through using modifiers to shape and sculpt the light. I could cut the intensity of light, or I could bounce light into shadow areas. There are a lot of tools available that would allow you to do that. But if you're on a photojournalism assignment, it's like shooting an event. I mean, you won't have that kind of control.
And when you're talking about modifiers, you're talking about flags, you're talking about
Yep. Bounces
basically
light too, right?
bounces, exactly. So anything that's going to actually send the light or cut the light or diffuse the light.
Diffuse the light. Yeah, exactly.
And for those people that are into film and video, much the same tools, many of the
Absolutely.
same requirements in order to shape and augment and control the light.
Exactly.
So you just told us about you had a specific theme you were trying to hit, a specific look you were trying to go for. When you're doing your own stuff, where do you look for inspiration?
Lately, I'd say Pinterest is just too easy. It's my go-to. There's just, such a plethora of images on there from painters to sculptors to, photographers. In fact, it can be a difficult place to go for inspiration because there's so many amazing images. It can be a little disheartening because you're like, how am I ever going to create stuff like this, right? So in some ways, it's it can work against you. But yeah, it's a great place to find sources of inspiration, and you can just like pin things and create a mood board, and you're off to the races. So that's typically my go-to these days.
More so than like Instagram, for example.
Yeah, more so than Instagram, although Instagram is great as well. Yeah, I have started using Instagram as well, saving images off of that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't find Instagram to be quite as easy to collect things and
Yeah,
manipulate things, and it's easy to find individuals that I find interesting,
yeah,
but not necessarily specific pieces to put something together, as you're saying, into a mood board or something like that.
yeah, yeah. I won't go to Instagram specifically to search for things, but when they come up, I'll save them and hopefully like go back and look at them later. But Pinterest is the tool that I use to look for specific inspirations.
And what about block? What about running into a situation where you just have no idea what the hell everything you look at you've done before, or you've seen someone else do better than you, or that you think you could do? What do you do to combat that?
Like there's never really a block because there's always stuff that I want to try. There are always things out there that inspire me or that I haven't done. There's no end to it. There's no end to it. So it's mainly maybe it's maybe staying motivated. Can be no, not even that. No, I always want to shoot, so there's not really a problem with inspiration. Honestly, it's time's more the thing. Like, there's never enough time.
Do you enjoy the post process as much as you enjoy the shooting? Like I know a lot of cinematographers that they're like, some of them love to shoot and some of them love to color. They love
Yeah,
different elements. Some love the lenses, some love
right.
love the modifiers, love the light.
Mhm.
What's that favorite process for you?
Yeah, for me, it would be the lighting. I don't enjoy the post as much. I don't mind, and it can be relaxing to a degree. But when you have a big backlog of post production work and you're sitting in front of the computer for hours and hours on end, I mean, that's not really what I got into this for. Um, but yeah, that being said, I try and keep the post production to a minimum unless it's absolutely required for a job. But I really want my images to look like photography and not like photo manipulations. So yeah, I keep the Photoshop to a minimal. And I would say my favorite part of the process is just lighting. That's what got me into photography was lighting. The images that caught my eye, that got me interested in the medium, all come down to spectacular lighting, dramatic lighting. So yeah, that's really where I get full satisfaction and enjoyment from. It's the process of lighting.
You said that much of your early interest in photography came from some books you found. Were there some notable names that popped out, some examples that have stayed with you and have kind of shaped your photographic path?
Yeah, I would say the one that stands out the most, which is actually like a photojournalist who shot a lot of dark and moody images. His name is Eugene Smith, and he was well known for covering a lot of travesties in the world. And he was sort of a dark and moody character himself. I think that was definitely in part due to the many tragedies that he covered in the span of his career.
Was this a wartime type of photography?
Yeah, yeah, famines in Ethiopia, war, conflict zones, things of that nature.
Have you ever shot anything in that vein?
No, no, I have not. Yeah, and I don't think I could. I'm too sensitive a person. There's no way. I don't know how they do it. Um, Sebastian Salgado is a Brazilian photographer who's done amazing documentary work covering the world of work. He's documented workers all over South America, Latin America, from like tuna fishermen to gold miners. Really interesting work. He's one of my favorite all time photographers.
What draws you to that?
Um, Maybe because it's so different than the work that I create myself. I think that's probably it. There's always a fascination with the things that I am not necessarily um, capturing or photographing, or that I don't have as much knowledge of. So then, there was a time when studio lighting and studio photography I was kind of obsessed with learning it because I didn't know anything about it. So it was a frontier that I just had to discover. And yeah, I spent a good couple of years just really kind of honing and crafting my knowledge of studio lighting.
Where were you finding that information? Like, did you take courses? Was there someone mentored you?
So that was an aspect that was lacking in my photojournalism education because it's just not a component that's stressed. I mainly learned that through assisting. I assisted some photographers over the span of about a year, and in that year, I mean, I learned so much. It gave me the confidence to invest in equipment and then to start like playing around in the studio by myself. And yeah, from there, I was able to learn pretty quickly. It sort of helped demystify the whole studio environment and how to use the equipment. Now, of course, like on YouTube, there's a lot of videos, so it's a lot more accessible. But back in the day, it was a whole different story.
You said you went to the studio and started playing around with who? Who was your subject at that point? Who were your first people that you brought in?
And you know what? Anybody who was willing to be photographed. Yeah, in order to build a portfolio, I would just look for interesting people. I might approach a stranger, or I might, find someone online. There's so many different ways. I might contact someone on Instagram. I might, there's sites. I might contact a modeling agency, ask to work with some of their new talent. Yeah, there's many different ways to find subjects.
And agencies were okay sending out to, let's say, a less than known photographer at the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. They're always happy to send their new talent to emerging photographers. So yeah, it's a wonderful marriage because the models need to practice, the photographers need to practice. It's an opportunity for both people to build a portfolio.
And in terms of building a portfolio, what should somebody be looking to build? Like, is there a number of projects? Is there certain types of projects that you should be able to show that you're capable of to build a sort of a general portfolio? Because I guess a lot of people don't necessarily know what they're going to specialize in when they're first starting out, right?
That's right.
So, what would you sort of suggest to somebody would be a good starter package, effectively?
Yeah, and well, in order to market yourself, you definitely want a sort of a cohesive portfolio, and you want it to be focused. You definitely, in most cases, you're not going to want a general portfolio. Now, that being said, it did work out well for me, and for a long time, I felt like that was a weakness because my portfolio was a little too general and too broad. But it ended up landing me a job at Now Magazine, and it just happened to be that they needed somebody with a very general skill set, but those jobs are extremely rare, so it was sort of a lucky break. But yeah, for the most part, you need to find what it is you love to shoot, and then shoot the hell out of it, and build a solid portfolio, and hopefully you can showcase that you have a specific style, because really that's what people are looking for when they're hiring a photographer. They want to know what they're going to get, right? They don't want to be surprised.
Now, I'm an amateur photographer or picture taker or hack, as I like to refer to myself. And one of the things that sort of has come up for me on numerous occasions, I'm sitting there, I'm looking at my stuff, and sometimes it looks a little bit like somebody's, and sometimes it looks like a little bit like somebody else's. But I can definitely say at no point in time do any of my pictures ever look definitively like an original Roby Levy.
Mhm.
They just don't. I don't have a style. I'm lucky to get what I get, and I fall ass backwards into it. How does somebody get a style? How does somebody find it? What defines a style in and of itself? How do you know when you've got it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's sort of that elusive thing, how do you get a style? It's I think that's one of the hardest parts of becoming a professional photographer, and a lot of people spend a lot of time like looking for their voice, and it's a sort of a process of self-discovery. I think it develops over time. It will evolve naturally, and I guess if it is probably possible to consciously determine what your style will be and go after it that way. That hasn't really been my approach. I know what I like, and I know how I like to do things. Even when I look at my own work, I'm not really sure I have a style. But it can be hard to be objective about your own work. So other people might be able to see some sort of theme or style in my work, but it's not something that I've been conscious of. But yeah, I think it's something that will come out over time, many hours of shooting, and eventually, I think as a photographer, you'll realize what you like to shoot, how you like to shoot it, and hopefully that will be shown in your body of work.
So speaking of work, you said you got an opportunity to shoot for Now Magazine,
Hmm.
which is a long running weekly in Toronto, covering a lot of stuff from politics to arts and entertainment, music, and everything in the region.
Right.
What's a workday look like for you there?
Yeah, so ironically, I ended up in somewhat of a photojournalistic role, even though that's not my official title, photojournalist. But in many ways, it is sort of similar. I would say the bulk of my work there is a little bit more portrait oriented than photojournalist's job would be. But yeah, there is no typical day, that's for sure. Every day is different. With that comes the challenge of not necessarily knowing what you're going to shoot until last minute. So in that sense, I sort of operate as a photojournalist. But yeah, there's no typical day. Every day is different. There's a lot of variety, which I actually really like. But I could be, in a studio one day, out on location on another. I could be shooting food assignments or, capturing a press conference. Yeah, it's extremely varied.
So what's the hardest part then about working it now and doing this?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. So the very thing that makes it challenging and exciting is the same thing that makes it challenging. It was the variety, right? So tight deadlines. It is a weekly, so it's not, it's not too bad. But depending on how heavy that week is, yeah, you got to work fast. You might not have a whole lot of time with your subjects, and you might not have too much context as to what it is you're actually getting into. So you have to work fast, think on your feet, learn how to put people at ease pretty quickly, be adaptable. You got to be creative and stay calm when things go wrong. If things aren't working out, you gotta kind of take a moment and recalibrate yourself.
When you're not doing stuff for now, you take commissions outside
Oh,
of that as
absolutely.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. Freelance all the time.
So how do you organize that? How are you getting clients?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the position it now has been quite a blessing because I think I've gotten so much exposure just through being published on a weekly basis. I mean, that's how many photographers have the opportunity to have work published weekly, right? That's a lot. So, and then I get the exposure through now it's Instagram as well. So there are a lot of eyeballs on my work, which over a couple of years I've seen an increase in my freelance work as a result.
Have you ever run into problems where your journalism work is working against your client-based work? Or is it because that you're doing so many portraits for now that you're also able to show
Yeah,
portraiture?
that's the thing. Yeah, I think I'm mostly known as a portraiture photographer. So most people that contact me for freelance gigs, it's typically portrait work.
Right.
So it's actually, yeah, it's worked in my favor. Yeah, yeah, and it's I get a lot of word of mouth referrals. So yeah, it's all pretty much happened organically, luckily, and I have been meaning to do a lot more marketing in terms of like targeted marketing towards art directors for ad agencies and such. But yeah, it's kind of hard to find the time between freelance work and now magazines. So
What sort of stuff would you do? Like if you went out to an art directors or creative directors at agencies, what does that kind of look like for you?
yeah, so typically my approach is just to find them on LinkedIn, and I'll check out their personal work. I'll see if their style would mesh well with my style. If I think this is somebody who I could work with stylistically, if I think my work would complement the work that they've done, I will typically I'll reach out to them on Instagram or on LinkedIn. I'll shoot them a message just to introduce myself and see if we can just get together for a chat. Half an hour of their time, it's just a nice way to, I think, get the conversation started. And yeah, and if they are open and receptive, then might have a pitch, or we see if there's a project coming up that we can maybe work on or collaborate on in the future. And typically, it's worked out really well.
What about getting repped? Are you repped anywhere right now with agency?
No, no, no. Not repped at the moment. It's something that I think every professional photographer thinks about at some point. And I had approached an agency just before the lockdown occurred, and they were very open and receptive to my work. But they had a full roster at the time. But it definitely was. It did give me some optimism in terms of maybe approaching some other agencies regarding being repped. But at this point, it's sort of something I've put on pause.
Is there a specific kind of thing that they're looking for, or do they also want to have variety on their rosters?
Yeah, they want to have variety on their rosters. They don't want like 10 competing photographers. So typically there might be like two photographers that shoot food, but they maybe will shoot them in different styles. There might be like a couple of photographers that do portrait, but again, their styles are different. But they definitely want to have a well-rounded agency where they can attract more clients, right? So they want someone maybe who can shoot automotive, someone who shoots food, someone who shoots fashion, celebrity. So they're looking for a well-rounded portfolio of photographers.
Regardless of time being the major hurdle to get over,
Yeah,
needing
always.
time to actually get out there and get yourself known and shoot some more and introduce yourself. What are some of the problems or issues you've run into in terms of promoting yourself?
I mean, cost can be a factor for sure. It's not cheap to print out promo material and then to mail out to everybody. But honestly, think that the major cost of promotion is time, because it doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot financially. I think the best way to go about marketing is to connect with people one on one, and I think that could be as easy as just reaching out with a few words and starting things that way, and then get your work in front of them. I mean, if you're someone who's sort of adverse to that route, then of course you could always create promo materials, printed cards. You can even send your portfolio, but it's definitely going to be a little more costly.
Is sending out print materials, is that a regular thing for photographers these days? I mean, with everything digital out there, really sending something
Yeah,
printed?
I know. People still do it, and I think the reason, it still works is because, maybe it's not so common. Like, we're so used to being bombarded by images online, but photography was meant to be a tactile printed medium. And for me, like, it's still my favorite way to digest images. I want to see it with reflected light, not light being transmitted through a monitor. I think photography shines best when it's, printed. And yeah, I think people like to be surprised with images, and they want to connect with the images in that tactile manner.
That's really
It's
fascinating.
yeah, and it's still a common practice in the commercial photography industry.
Do you get your photos printed or do you print them yourself?
Yeah, I yeah, I used to print in school. Now I get them printed, but it's not something that I do often enough. But it's something that I've been meaning to do. Yeah, I'd love to have just prints laying around the house.
Not even on the walls, just strewn
Not even at
about.
all. So it could be all over the tables. They could just be all over the place. That's fine.
When people come over, you just,
Yeah,
oh,
they're just
sorry,
living
I just have my art everywhere.
there.
You're a guy with a couple of young kids. You've got a full-time job working with now.
Yeah,
You obviously have pet projects that you want to do outside of it, and you have commissions.
yeah,
There's one thing to sort of just be busy all the time, but you can definitely lose drive
right.
when you're that busy, when it's that going all the time.
Mhm.
How do you stay positive, motivated, and creative, really, in the wake of all of that output?
Well, definitely just, seeing images that are better than yours is definitely what drives my motivation, because I just want to get better and be better all the time, right? So I'm just constantly striving to improve, and that's really what keeps me motivated, because I see images all the time that I want to create, and if I'm not able to create them now, I want to be able to create them in the future. So that's definitely my major source of inspiration. There's just so many incredible, talented photographers out there, and I just want to be amongst them.
Who are you looking at right now who really excites you?
Oh man, that's a great question. Let's
Get
see.
out the Pinterest.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're gonna stump me now, because Pinterest is my main source of photography inspiration. I don't always know who is the source of the image. So yeah, I might have to get back to you.
Well, what do you think about not people not being credited properly? Let's say, like, have you
Yeah,
ever seen your stuff ripped off and used somewhere? And
all the time.
well, so what is that? How does that feel?
I know it used to bother me a lot, and just now, I just let it go. Honestly, it's to me, it's like yeah, I try. I don't let it bother me, to be honest. I'd rather just like focus on creating, as long as the image isn't being like used for commercial purposes. If they're just using it to like repost or to, even if it's just like on a website or something. Like if it's something small, I don't have the energy to worry about it and to chase after it. It's in the grand scheme of things. It's to me, I don't have the time and energy to put there. I'd rather put that energy into creating.
Life is short.
Yeah.
What are the avenues available to you then? I mean, can you send an email to them and say, "Hey, take my stuff down," or credit me properly, or that's my thing?
Yeah, I have done that on occasion, and most people are receptive. I've never had anyone, kind of get into it with me about it. People are usually receptive and sometimes apologetic. Sometimes they don't even mean to do it, or they don't realize. But yeah, for the most part, a simple email or a quick message. I've sometimes had to message people on Instagram or whatever, but yeah, it's not something that like, irks me too much.
Have you ever looked into, or are you, for that matter, do you think it's something that photographers in general should look into? Is, for example, the Canadian copyright laws, the U.S. copyright laws, the usage rights, and all that stuff?
Yeah.
I've noticed in video work for a lot of years, the supposition is that you make it and that at the end they own the copyright, not you. Now, that's not actually the law
Yeah.
unless you assign those rights. And it's not necessarily in any contract.
Right.
I've come across a lot of cinematographers who don't know their rights that way, and a lot of photographers who don't know their rights. And then there's a lot of people that, because so many people don't know the rights, and because the clients seem to assume that they own it, that's what they're paying for,
Yeah.
that everybody's just kind of letting them have it.
Yeah.
And that's reproductions, and copyright is the right to reproduce stuff is a a large part of the business of the image creator, of the music creator, of the video creator.
Right.
And it's something that's being eroded.
Yeah.
Is that something that concerns you and other photographers you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point, and it's very true. I think part of the problem too is just like the burden of having to educate the client, and then the fear of like maybe potentially like losing a client over it.
Right.
So I think that's somewhat of a prohibitive factor in terms of furthering the cause of
Right.
protecting rights in terms of photography and copyright. But it's a big problem and it needs to be addressed. It's just how do we go about addressing that?
Right. Because this isn't something where a union is involved. This isn't an association.
Right.
Is there a photography association that everyone can join?
There are professional associations, but I think what it comes down to is like really the onus of educating the client really does come down to the photographer. So
Right. So you pick your spots.
yeah.
Fair enough. We all do. Honestly, you speak so passionately about what you're doing. Like that's the nice thing that I'm hearing from so many people, especially when we're talking about maybe the less passionate stuff about it. Like talking about the business stuff is normally it's like eating your vegetables, right? It's like I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is everybody actually has lots of interesting stuff about how they deal with it, why they deal with it, and they all know it's important. There used to be a time that everybody thought it wasn't important, or I don't want to deal with that, or that's why I have a manager, or that's why I have an agent. The truth of the matter is that in today's day and age, you're taking care of your entire business, and if you're not, well, you won't be in business very long.
Right.
It's pretty simple.
Very true. Yeah.
Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, you can find me through my website at samuelengelking.com. I'm also on Instagram, so you can find me on Instagram at samuelengelking. And those are the two places you can find me.
And of course, every week in Now Magazine.
And Now Magazine, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing with us how you make a living.
Thanks, Roby. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Subscribe to Making a Living Show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and pretty much anywhere else you get your podcasts. For more on the show, visit makingalivingshow.com or follow along at Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Making a Living 1. Making a Living Show is produced by Next Exit Media and hosted by me, Roby Levy. Thanks for listening.